Ayubowan, you are joining us today on another episode of Talk with Sri Lankans, which is hosted by SriLankaNZ. Along with our YouTube channel, Sri Lankans is known to the Sri Lankan community in New Zealand as the only Sri Lankan community newspaper distributed throughout all the major cities of New Zealand. So, as Sri Lankan expats living in New Zealand, one of the main challenges we face is how to abide the law of the land. We may not be aware much about the legal system of New Zealand, and things may be different here compared to Sri Lanka, and we might feel vulnerable when trying to find legal support. So, to clear us from such doubts, today we invited Sumudu Thode, who is a renowned criminal defense lawyer in New Zealand, and she's also the Vice President of Criminal Bar Association of New Zealand. And of course, she's of our very own Sri Lankan origin. So, Sumudu, first of all, we'd like to welcome you to take some time off your busy schedule and joining with our discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, so before we go into more details about the legal stuff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did your life start in New Zealand?
I moved here with my parents and my brother just before I started intermediate school, and so I completed my high school and university studies in New Zealand, and then I've been working as a criminal defence lawyer for about the last 15 years.
Yeah, so getting to the criminal defense law. So what attracted you to follow this path as a criminal defense lawyer?
Studying law, I think for me, litigation was that's what felt like law. So going into court rather than, doing something like conveyancing and being in an office. So for me, there was a real attraction for me in litigation and advocacy. Criminal defence law really attracted to me because we're dealing with the most vulnerable people in our society. We're dealing with people at their lowest and at a point where I think most people feel really isolated and alone and helpless, and I can make a difference to somebody's life at that point. So it really attracted to that career path attracted to me because I have real capacity to help people in this job, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll get into more details about that situation, why people would turn into crimes like that. So before that, I'd like to ask, so usually as Sri Lankan expatriates, we tend to seek professional support from other Sri Lankans or other people of Sri Lankan origin. For example, if we need a doctor, we would go for a Sri Lankan doctor, and if we need a mechanic, we would go for a Sri Lankan mechanic. But is it the same situation in legal practice?
I can't talk about legal practice, but certainly in criminal law, I think it's the complete opposite. Most people that have been charged, I can understand there's a huge level of shame and anxiety and confusion that comes with it, and they don't necessarily want other people knowing your issues and the lowest point of your life potentially. So I have had many experiences where I've seen other Sri Lankan families in court or other Sri Lankans in court, and they've sort of said, oh, I'm here to help a friend, or I'm here to support somebody, but we as lawyers have access to the court list. You can see who's on there. You can pick a Sri Lankan name from a list any day of the week. So I find it's the complete opposite because of, for me, I think it's the shame, but there's any other reasons as well. I think they would prefer to go to somebody who's not of Sri Lankan origin, probably because of fears that we would go and talk about it within the community, but obviously as lawyers we're bound by confidentiality of our clients. So if I have a Sri Lankan client, I can't go and gossip about what's happened to them or what they've done, or any information about them in the community, to anybody else. But my experience is that they don't necessarily seek out Sri Lankans, and probably just go
but
to
you probably still have Sri Lankan clients, maybe lesser compared to any other profession, maybe.
Yes, I think so. I think so, yeah.
So one of the most talked about yet disturbing topics in New Zealand is family violence. And when we hear family violence, the picture we get is usually physical abuse. But what is actually deemed as family violence according to New Zealand law? Is it just physical abuse, or is there more to it than that?
No, there is certainly more. When you say family violence, obviously that relates to physical violence, but there are other forms of abuse that is not just physical. So if you look at legislation, it is illegal to obviously assault somebody. So physical violence is not. It is illegal, but there's also psychological abuse, sexual abuse, there's threatening people, intimidation, harassment, damaging property, even sort of ill treatment of animals or financial abuse, abuse of children, withholding children from parents. All of that is also a form of abuse. Although none of that is physical abuse in the sense of hitting somebody. So the legislation still makes all of those other acts criminal, as well as obviously physical abuse.
So it's more like family abuse should be the correct terminology for that, or family violence also can be used?
It could be, I think it's a wider term than just physical abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice to someone who is charged with a criminal offense? Like, let's say someone got arrested, and what would be the first steps they should follow if they are charged with a criminal offense?
So I would start even before you're charged. I would go a step back to the point that the police want to speak to you or to interview you. So let's say the police come and knock on your door and say, look, we've had a complaint, or we want to talk to you because we have this investigation. I would say that at that point you should engage a lawyer, or you should speak to a lawyer. So if you know a lawyer, you can give them a call, but the police do have what's called the PDLA list. It's the Police Detention Legal Assistance Scheme list. It's a list of free lawyers that are on call any day of the week. So it doesn't cost you to call any of those lawyers on that list. Even if it's 2 or 3 in the morning, we get phone calls quite regularly. So it's really important that you engage a lawyer so that you can talk to them right from the get-go, even before you're charged. So before you do an interview, before you give any information to the police, it's important you do that. It's also really important that you speak to a lawyer who's got the expertise. So there's no point in, if you're being arrested for, we talked about family violence, if the police say, look, we want to talk to you about a family violence issue, there's no point in calling the lawyer who did your business transaction, your buying or selling a house. So it's really important that you speak to a lawyer who's got the expertise in criminal law, which is why that PDLA list is really helpful, because those are lawyers that specialise in criminal defence law. So the lawyers can help obviously to give you advice, but they can talk to the police and get information as well if you're not sure what's going on. They can help with getting an interpreter organised if that's something that needs to be done. They can help with getting other agencies involved if you need any assessments done or anything like that. So I think it's really important that you get a lawyer involved, especially if you're not so sure of the process.
So basically what you're saying is even before getting arrested, they get some chance to actually get legal support for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, you have the right to counsel, right to a lawyer, and that kicks in at the point that, let's say at the point that the police come and knock on the door and say, hey, I want to talk to you, and you should be exercising your right to speak to a lawyer, and a specialist lawyer. If you've got a broken pipe, you're not going to call an electrician and say, hey, I've got water all over my house, what do I do? You're going to call a plumber. So it's similar. Like, it's important that you speak to somebody who's got the expertise, and let them guide you through the process.
You said something about a PDLA. What's that about?
So that's just anyone who's arrested or being spoken to by the police. There's a free list of lawyers that the police have to have available for you. So it's part of the Bill of Rights as well. You have right to free legal advice, and the police have to make that available to you. So they usually just call up and say, look, we've got this person who we want to talk to them about, an assault or drink driving or murder. You're on the list today, and they'll give us a bit of a background and say, could you please speak to the client? We get to talk to them privately. So whatever the lawyer and the client talks about, we don't go back and tell the police about it, but it just means that you can get advice particular to your case.
So do you have any advice for the victims of such crimes? What would be their steps? What would be their first steps if something like that happens?
I obviously in criminal defence law, so my involvement with victims of crimes are very limited to involvement at court. But if you are a victim of any offence, it is important that you get help. In whatever shape or form that help may be. So, if your car's been broken into, it's important that you contact the police and make a police report. If you are in an abusive relationship, there's a number of agencies that you can contact to get help. And ultimately, it is a police matter if you decide to go to the police. So it's important that you seek help, again, from agencies that deal with the issues that you're going through. And then they can talk you through the process of what options are available and what you can and can't do and should and shouldn't do.
Yeah. So sometimes someone who is maybe capable of committing crime might show certain telltale signs before actually committing the crime. So if their loved ones or family members find out that the person is going through a wrong path, let's say someone drinks too much, and obviously they might get arrested for drunk driving soon enough. So if the family members or loved ones feel like someone they know is going through the wrong path, is there any support or consultancy for them to actually discuss and prevent that person from actually committing a crime?
Look, anyone who's going through the criminal justice system, there's usually a reason why they found themselves in that position. There's obviously situations where it's a complete mistake, and it's a one-off, out of character. But certainly the type of work that I deal with, there's reasons for why people find themselves in that situation. A lot of the time it is substance abuse. Sometimes it's to do with unresolved trauma or grief, but there's certainly a lot that family members or friends or colleagues can do to help before they get to a stage where they're arrested. So the example that you gave was, somebody who's drinking a bit too much. So if you notice that somebody in your family, It's a little bit more than just having a beer after work or having a single drink after work. It's getting a little bit, a little bit more frequent. One drink turns into 2 to 3 to 4, and then you can see how, after a few drinks, they act a bit differently. Maybe, they get a bit angry, or they get a bit sad, or just you can see the behavioural changes, and you can see how that could spiral into some sort of offending. Again, it's really important to ask for help. So it depends on the type of issues, and it's really hard to kind of generalize. But say with alcohol, if it is alcohol, then these agencies like Community Alcohol and Drug Services, they're called CADS, CADS, or it could be Salvation Army. Depends on where in the country you are and what support is available. But it's important to again ask for help from an agency that can help. So it could, and some of the times it could be a matter of just going to your GP, because your GP will have a number of referrals that they can make as well for counselling. So if it's grief counselling, for example, because they're not dealing with the death of somebody or the loss of somebody, the GPs can make referrals in terms of counselling, or psychologists or psychiatrists or medication. I think the main thing is it's important to know that you're not alone, and it's important to ask for help from the right agencies. And there's a lot of help. So if you don't get the answer that you want or the help that you want from one person or one agency, try something else. There is a lot of help available.
And speaking of help, now when we hear something like legal charges, what we think of is like an expensive bill of legal charges if someone's actually trying to consult legal support. So are there any free of charge services or programs that the New Zealand public can access if they are in need of any legal consultancy?
Yes, there is. A lot of it is income tested, so it will depend on whether you are genuinely in a position to pay those funds yourself. If that's the case, then there may not be free support available. So I'm talking, for example, about legal aid. So if you are charged with an offence and you're not in a position to pay for a lawyer, you may qualify for legal aid to pay all or some of the fees for a lawyer. But that depends on the type of charge you've got, the seriousness of it, your income, your assets, your liabilities, all of that. But another good place to start would be community law centres. So if you've got any issues, you can contact your community law centre, and they've got in-house lawyers that you can speak to as well. Generally speaking, they can only deal with low-level stuff, and they certainly wouldn't go to court if you're facing charges, but they can refer you to somebody that can do that as well.
Yes. Speaking of free of charge legal consultancy, and I think you also kind of do something like that with your podcast, which is called That's Just Criminal. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your podcast, and why do you think it's important?
Yes, so I've got a podcast that's just criminal. It's sponsored by the Criminal Bar Association and LexisNexis. We started, me and another lawyer who's actually the other vice president of the Criminal Bar Association, Annabelle Creswell, we started the podcast last year. I think for us, it's not so much about giving legal advice, because the podcast, it's for criminal, it's for lawyers as well as non-lawyers. It's not so much about giving advice, but it's more just about, it's a different medium of reaching the public. So we as lawyers have, any number of seminars we can go to, and books we can read, and papers we can read, and to learn and absorb information. But this is another way of absorbing information, but in a different way. So it's a lot more relaxed, it's a lot more colloquial. You can listen to it while you're driving to and from work or between courts or something. And it's not sort of as serious. But I think it's just a different way of getting information to the public. So it's kind of, I guess, how you're doing a YouTube channel. You could write a newspaper in the way that we know, and publish it, but you can also put those articles as interviews like this, or put snippets of it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. It's just a different way of getting information to the public. But we've actually had more non-lawyers listening to us, because people are interested in criminal law. It's
So yeah, I noticed that it's more like what you guys do is like some sort of a case study. Like, I mean, not a study, but it's like you would just talk about maybe a potential scenario or case. It goes like something like that, right? But I have noticed in some of your episodes. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, we haven't sort of got a really strict structure, because I think that limits you. So we've picked a topic that we think is interesting, and we've done some podcasts on topics. There was a really interesting case from Melbourne, so we did one on that. Which was about a lawyer in Melbourne who ended up being an informant. So that was more like, I suppose, about that particular case and impact of that on lawyers. So yeah, we haven't really kind of narrowed down or limited ourselves to this is exactly what we're doing. So I mean, we've got ideas to do interviews or case studies or different topics or question and answer. Some of it's funny, some of it's serious. So yeah, just a different way of reaching the public.
Yeah. So most of us Sri Lankan expats living here may not be New Zealand citizens. So some of us are under certain types of immigration visa. So are there any consequences for their immigration status if they are charged with a criminal offence?
Probably not if they are charged, but there may be consequences if they are convicted. It's hard to say without knowing, there's a lot of factors that play into that, like the type of offence or the type of conviction, the type of sentence, the seriousness of it, the type of visa they've got, and all of that. But generally speaking, for any visa or citizenship application, immigration look at a fit and proper person test. Now, I have to be honest, I'm not an immigration lawyer or consultant. So again, really important you talk to an immigration lawyer about this. So I'm only talking to you about it from the impact in terms of the criminal law side of things. But immigration look at whether you're a fit and proper person to be, to have a work visa or a residence visa or citizenship. And so let's say if you've been convicted of, for example, a rape or burglary or some sort of serious offence, they go, well, are you a fit and proper person when you've been convicted of rape and you've done 10 years in prison? But on the other side, they might go, oh, look, it's a traffic offence where, you crashed into a parked car. They may not see that as impacting on your fit and proper person test. Whereas obviously the more serious the offence, the more likelihood that they may look at it and go, to put it simply, you're not the type of person that we would want to give a visa to. So important you consult with an immigration specialist or lawyer, because they will know your particular immigration issues or visa you've got, conditions, and so forth. And then also really important you consult with a criminal lawyer to go, look, what type of charges, what type of conviction have I got, what sentence am I looking at, how serious is it in the grand scheme of things, and how can this impact? Because worst case scenario could be that your visa is cancelled or not renewed. So, and that can have really, really serious consequences for the person as well as their family. So if they've had, if they have to leave New Zealand, that can obviously have really serious consequences, especially if you've got, say, kids at school or something like that. So a criminal lawyer can obviously help you navigate that and see what applications can be made, along with an immigration lawyer who will deal with the immigration side of things.
So to finally end our conversation, is there any message you would like to give to our viewers, especially our viewers who are mostly Sri Lankan expats who may be keen on seeking legal consultancy?
I think it's really important to know what type of lawyer you need and go to somebody who specializes in that. Not every lawyer is the same. So, like I said before, if you're building a house and, you're not going to ask your plumber to put your lights and do your electrical work. So, you need to, or if you've got a headache, you're not going to go to your dentist. And I know those sound like really silly examples, but you've got a medical problem, you go to a specialist in that field. You want a house built, you go to a specialist in that field. People think, oh, all lawyers are the same. That's not true. We specialize in a particular aspect of law. So, you'll go to one person if you're buying or selling a house, you go to somebody else if you've got an immigration issue, you go to somebody else if you've got an employment issue. So go to a lawyer who's got their expertise in the area of law that you're looking for. I also think it's really important to feel comfortable with your lawyer, because you're talking to them, especially in the criminal defense space, you're talking to them about really personal things. You're really trusting them to guide you through this process. So it's really important that you can trust your lawyer and you have a good rapport and relationship with them. So it does pay to maybe talk to a couple of different people and just find somebody who you can communicate properly with and that you trust. So, but also, like I said before, it's really important that you do have a lawyer guide you through some of these difficulties that people may have.
So usually law firms have all sorts of lawyers, right?
Sorry, say that again.
A law firm could have all sorts of lawyers. Could it be like?
Sometimes, not always, because some law firms do specialize in certain things. So I have my own law firm, but we only specialize in criminal defense law. So, if you call me up and say, like, I need to buy a house, I say, sorry, I can't help you, go to somebody else. There are some law firms that do, general practice, and they might have one lawyer that does criminal and one lawyer that does this, etc. But just find a specialist lawyer that can help you.
All right, Sumudu, thank you for your time and joining us for this discussion. And from Sri Lankan's team, we'd like to wish you all the very best in your career and your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.